Call our meeting to order. Let the minutes reflect all members present with the exception of Manager Wagaman with prior notice. The first thing today we'll do is set the agenda. Anybody like to add or subtract from the agenda today? Anybody?
Staff have no changes?
Okay, with that, we'll need a motion.
I make a motion to accept the agendas presented today.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The approval of the minutes.
Well, in the absence of Manager Wagaman.
Yeah, I know, I was going to say, we're going to wait for you.
We all have our roles in this board, and that's usually Steve's. Madam President, I move that we approve the regular meeting minutes for the
23.
Wednesday, October 23rd.
Yep. Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Consent agenda.
President Preiner, Board of Managers, we do have 3 permits ready for your consideration, all with Caprock items. We're happy to entertain any questions.
Madam Chair, today I'm not going to ask for any to come up, can you believe it? But that Lina Lake ones is really a big development, isn't it? And I know and have seen the site, so I understand that it's a lot of impervious surface going on in open space. But anyway, I know that our staff and engineers do an excellent job, so I'm not going to go through the questioning on that one. So I would like to Caprock, number 19-013, 19-084, and 19-092.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. With that, we'll recess our regular meeting and go to our 2020 management plan. And this will be a public hearing. The regular board meeting is now recessed and the public hearing is open on the Rice Creek Watershed 2020 management plan. The purpose of the hearing is to receive comments from parties having an interest in the Rice Creek Watershed's 2020 watershed management plan pursuant to Minnesota statutes 103B, 231, and subdivision 7C. Notice of the hearing was published in the St. Paul Pioneer Press, emailed to all plan review agencies within the Watershed District, and posted on the district's website. First, I'd like to ask Kyle Axel, our project manager, to give a brief history and summary of the Watershed Management Plan update process. When his remarks are completed, the floor will be open to members of the public who wish to address the board regarding the Watershed Management Plan. At that time, if you wish to comment, please come forward to the podium, state your name and address for the record. If you have a written copy of your statement or any other documents you'd like to submit, please submit them to Teresa Staska, our meeting clerk. During the public comment, managers are welcome to ask questions of commenters to clarify their remarks. Today's hearing is intended to record additional comments on the 2020 Water Management Plan. It is not designed to receive comments on district rules, its 2020 budget, or others project-specific concerns. Kyle, please proceed.
Madam President, members of the board, thank you. Again, we'll get right underway here. I intend to be quite brief, as we've discussed this at great length in the past. But first, a general overview of the 2020 Watershed Plan, its content. The Chapter 1 and 2 work to describe the land and water resources within the district. And moving into Chapter 3, we get into much more of the priority issues, measurable goals, and policies, so looking at flood control issues, water quality issues, drainage issues, et cetera. We have a thorough outline of the district's intended capital improvement program for the next 10 years and the anticipated costs of those programs and projects. We define the options that are available to the district for funding watershed district programs and projects over the next 10 years. And then further, we provide direction for the administration of the watershed plan itself, including its relationship to municipal local water plans and content of those plans. The plan has been posted online for members of the public to review and provide comment. We will be accepting comments through the end of the day today. The process to date, it's been quite lengthy at this point, beginning back in January of 2018 through August of last year. We worked with the board on a strategic direction process encompassing 7 board workshops. During that time, we had 2 citizen advisory committee meetings to weigh in on that direction, as well as 2 technical advisory committee meetings. And that group is made up mostly of city and county partners, state agency staff, SWCDs, and those folks. At the beginning of that time, February through April, we had a 60-day plan initiation notice. That is a process required by statute. 11 letters were received providing initial input to the plan, which was, all of that information was considered by the board as a part of that process. In September of 2018, we embarked on the plan drafting process, which again was a series of 8 workshops with the board. We had 6 CAC meetings and 3 technical advisory committee meetings as well during that time. Summary of the comments received. We had a 60-day review comment period recently. Again, we had 7 of 7 state review agencies responding. 4 of those agencies submitted comments. Of the 47 other review agencies, cities, counties, SWCDs, 11 submitted comment letters. In total, we had 158 comments received. 60 or so resulted in proposed changes to the draft watershed plan, which is currently out for comment. And although we do note that many of those comments that were not resulting in changes did address Rice Creek Rule Administration, and in general, our response to that is that the plan is not the vehicle for discussing or deciding rule language. My understanding is the board may consider a rule revision at a future date here coming up. So that 60-day review period ended October 9th. October 23rd, the board released a response to 60-day comments. November 4th, here today, we're having a public hearing as required by statute. And our intent is, hopefully by December 11th, we'll be ready to release a final plan to Bowser for their final 90-day review. That would incorporate all of the changes resulting from the comments received to date. And then hopefully on March 25th, or hopefully before, we would have a final plan adopted by the Rice Creek Board of Managers. I will also note, and that is it for my presentation today. We have City of Hugo here today to make some comments. We had a very productive discussion with Hugo late last week and wanted to make sure that they were here today to pass those comments on to the board. So with that, I am done and can open for comments.
Thank you, Kyle. Any comments for Kyle? If not, we'll go ahead with our open forum. Hugo would like to come up, state name and address for the record.
Good morning. Brian Bear representing the City of Hugo. Thanks for inviting me this morning. I got to say, you guys know how to kick off the week, right? Early Monday morning. What a way to go, talking about watershed policy. So here we are. All right. First, thanks for inviting us, though. And Kyle has just gone through the process, and I think you outlined a good process for your watershed plan. So I think you did a good job with that, and we appreciate that. So the process that you use and that I've seen used by this watershed district and this board in recent years has been pretty good at collecting feedback, collecting input, and sometimes you guys are responsive to that feedback, and so that's appreciated too. So thanks for that, and I mean that this is about collaboration and partnerships, and you receiving feedback. Sometimes you might even give us a little feedback, but most of the time it seems like you're on the receiving end of it. So I appreciate that as well. As we are also often on the receiving end of a lot of feedback. So Kyle mentioned that he had a lot of comments and that resulted in some plan changes, and so thanks for that. Hugo, it looks like, I'm not sure if, yeah, here it is. We gave you a letter that was approved by our city council after some discussion. So the comments that you got from the city of Hugo are from our city council, and there are 26 of those comments. And I hope you have some time because 26 of those is going to take me a while to get through. Actually, no, let's focus on 3, okay?
I was hoping it would come around.
So I think you've got a grid from staff that looks like this, that went through and summarized all of the comments. And Hugo has got, I mentioned 26 of those. And the 3 that I want to focus on if you had a chance to look at our comments, I'm guessing you could predict which three those might be. The first one is going to be comment number 12, Hugo comment number 12, and that's related to your land use section. So the land use section in your plan is section 3.2.4.2. And so it's a lot of numbers with a lot of points, but that's the section 3.2.4.2. Land use, and we wanted to comment on that section primarily because we don't think that that has a very good place in a watershed plan. What you're talking about is land use and impacts of land use on drainage and flooding and things like that. As a city sees land use in its pure sense has no impact on flooding and drainage and things like that. The goal that you have here is to understand the effects of land use changes on runoff volume and so forth. I can just tell you it doesn't. You can just delete this. The land use doesn't affect runoff or flooding or things like that. The thing that you're worried about are site improvements, not land use. So if you have a piece of property and it has a building on it and a piece of pavement on it, what do you care how it's used? If you use it for your house, that's fine. If you divide it up and you turn it into an apartment complex, as long as you don't make any site improvements, that won't have any effect on drainage. Now it has a big change on the community, and the city has a land use plan to guide those impacts and to regulate that piece of it. If you change that same parcel into commercial, that will also have a big impact on the community for a lot of reasons that you can think of, but it won't impact drainage. Not until we start adding site improvements. Okay, so I understand that you'll be concerned about whether a parcel is developed or undeveloped or the amount of site improvements it has, but you shouldn't be concerned about in any way, shape, or form the land use on that parcel. And I'm going to tell you, you don't want to be. You don't want to be in the middle of that discussion. So I just ask you to focus where you want to focus and stay away from the land use discussion. Very intentionally stay away from that land use piece, okay? I hope that makes sense to you. It also says in here, under why these issues are important, it says that land use is important for flooding and drainage and things like that, and I tell you that I don't think it is. But then it says, in order to understand that the district developed hydrologic and hydraulic modeling of future land use conditions based on current community zoning maps. You can't do that. A zoning map is a regulatory tool. It's kind of like one of your rules. It is not our future land use map. Our zoning map and a land use map are very different things, and if you wanted to understand future land use, you should have used a future land use map, not a zoning map, okay? Land use isn't something that the watershed is as good at as municipalities are. Watersheds are pretty good at implementing drainage rules and things like that, and of course you're talking about your watershed plan tonight, or this morning. So, and then there's 5 policies in that section, and if you read the policies, those don't have anything to do with land use. They might be good policies, but they're not related to or connected to land use in any way. We think the reason this section is here is to deal with the Northeast Lino Lakes Drainage Area Comprehensive Stormwater Management Program, which affects part of Hugo. And even though that is the example, there haven't been any land use modifications suggested by the Watershed District to the city of Hugo in that area. So anyway, I'd ask you to take a look at that section and change it or delete it. The second comment is comment number 17. And that is funding distribution. It is section 3.2.6.2. 3.2.6.2. Okay. And this is an intriguing section. And let's call a spade here, right? This is the this is the section that is somewhat connected to the conversation that you've been having as a board related to the legislation that's been pending. Okay? The Hugo City Council had a discussion on this legislation last spring and decided not to support the legislation. And if you remember that discussion, the City Council thought that this might be a worthwhile conversation to have about geographic distribution of funding within the Watershed District. But it probably isn't the best place to have that discussion down at the Capitol. It'd be a good place to have that discussion in your watershed plan. So the council's asked you to put a section about geographic equity in your plan. And there's a section here about funding distribution that touches on it just a little bit. It says that location is the first place, is one of the first criteria for distribution of funding. And just to try to understand how this is impactful to you and to the cities within the Watershed District, I think focusing on what that means, location, and in this area and other areas of the plan, you do talk about geographic needs. And this is an opportunity for you right here in your plan to outline some guidelines. What does this mean? If all things are being equal about the water quality improvements, things like that for watershed projects, how are you going to make a decision about the geography of the project if that choice comes to you? Having some guidelines would be important. I think you can do that. The Met Council's having the same discussion right now, geographic equity when it comes to transportation funding. The East Metro is an area that, based on all the criteria that they've established for how to prioritize projects, East Metro gets left behind. And that gets brought up at their meetings about, geez, good job putting the criteria together, but there aren't any projects in the East Metro. So there needs to be an element of geographic equity included, and they're having that discussion now. So I think you can do it. It'd be better to do it here, and even if it resulted in a delay of approval of your plan versus risking having this discussed down at the Capitol. So that's what our council would prefer that you do. And then the third comment is, I think we had two comments, comment 18 and comment 23, that are fairly similar and not something that we had talked about before. This is permitting and enforcement, permit review, inspection, and coordination. So there's two sections here, section 3.2.8.3 and in the funding chapter 4.2.13. Thank you, yeah. And so, this is a discussion that we might want to start to have about the LGU responsibility. So it's been about 15 years now that Hugo has been the LGU in this program, and I think it's worked pretty well. That's our perspective. I hope it's your perspective too. This is a good example of a partnership. The city is implementing the permit requirements of the watershed. We've adopted your rules. And the interesting part about this, and maybe the reason that it's come up, is because as we looked at the funding piece, your program for permitting and regulatory management is getting to be pretty expensive. And when we compare that to the way that we would implement your rules, the program that we use isn't very expensive. We have a very effective cost recovery method of dealing with this through a collection of funds from developers and things like that. And of course, in our review, we can review this one time, city and watershed district together. And I think now is a time we're not looking necessarily for an immediate change in your plan today. It's just, it might be time to evaluate that. How has that worked over the last 15 years? And if it's been as good as we think it is, maybe it's a program that could be expanded if it's a good example. And if it is a good example, it may result in some serious cost savings for the watershed district, and it may give taxpayers a break if there's a more efficient way of implementing rules and things like that. So those are the three comments. So in summary, I think, what are my expectations today, early on a Monday morning? So First comment, number 12, I think our expectation is that the plan would change to deal with land use, either eliminate it or change it very significantly. Second comment, on number 17, I think is a critical thing for the district to deal with at this point in time. It's a big policy question for you. Our council has weighed in as well, and that is something that you should carefully consider before adopting the plan, to see whether this is something that can be dealt with by you. And then the third one are these questions about LGU. We've made the comments here, and I think we're not expecting an immediate change. As I mentioned, we're just looking to have initiate a longer-term discussion about this program and whether there should be a different way of funding cities that contribute to it, or a way to encourage other cities to do the same thing. So that's where I'm at. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Brian. Questions from the board?
Madam President? Mr. Bear, thank you for coming. And you're right, we are trying to work collaboratively wherever we can. Are you aware that at our last meeting, we amended language in direct response to your number 17? If not, I will advise you.
So I've got a comment here that that has some fairly vague language in it, and I think what we'd be looking for is some specificity, some actual guidelines in a policy. So and I don't mean to, I know you're about to give me the explanation, and what I would just tell you in advance is, as I look at the policy in that chapter for funding distribution, the first policy says that the district will develop metrics and/or processes to assist with the prioritization of projects. And I think that's a good step. That's not exactly a policy, that's more of an implementation measure. But the policy may be something that you want to create right now. This is the time to do it. You're creating a policy document. So create the policy that provides the direction for those metrics and include a geographic component there. That's what we'd be looking for.
Okay. Madam President? So as I reviewed your comments, and have been thinking about this issue, of course, for a year now, and it seemed to me that there's two ways you can address that concern. One is by arbitrarily donating money in three pots. The other one is to take a careful look to make sure that the needs in those three pots are being met. And because our needs are not the same every year, they vary depending on whether or not we've cleaned out a ditch or haven't cleaned out a ditch, I thought we should address this issue by assuring that we were responsive to needs rather than so much money in each pot. So at our last meeting, this board agreed with my viewpoint, and we adopted the following language. RCWD is committed to treating its LGUs, county partners, and landowners equitably, addressing needs and concerns in a respectful and responsive manner. When a new concern and/or request for assistance is received, RCWD will evaluate the issue considering the urgency of the problem, the nature of the district's responsibility, and the capacity of the district to respond, including available funding and staffing considerations. In all cases, the matter will be fairly considered and evaluated. We don't ever want to have another ditch 3 wait so long. So that was my thought and the board's agreement on how we should address the concern you raised on number 17. In terms of the land use, Madam President, maybe we can bring that back to another. I'm the new guy. I've only been here 4 years. I'm the new guy. But in those 4 years, I can't count the number of times I've been told, we can't do anything that affects land use. We got that. We understand that. That's not the intent. So if we've missed that somehow, or maybe there's something we can do in the language to alleviate your concern, but it was never our intent to do anything about land use. You're right. We don't want it. We're happy to have you stand between us and everyone else when it comes to land use. In terms of, we've already agreed that we're going to look at our rules, and we're always open to, we do want to keep our rules as effective and efficient and management as effective and efficient as we can. And if there are things we're doing that we shouldn't be doing, maybe we'll have one of those meetings with all our partners and put that on the table. So thank you. I do thank you for your leadership in this area and for your participation in this.
Thank you.
Board members, anybody else, comments?
No, but I am looking forward to that land use. I mean, it's words, but it also is that it is the city that
Yeah.
does their comprehensive plan, decide their land use. So it is what are we doing with that land or what's on it? And then we review it to make sure it's doing according to our rules. So, good point.
Okay.
Kyle?
Excuse me, Brian. Madam President, if I may, I think at this point too, again, based on our discussion that I had with Brian and Rachel last week, internally since then, I think we have a plan to deal with that land use issue, the language in that chapter. With board's blessing, we've got about a month here between today and December when we would maybe like to release the plan. Our plan would be to take another look at that language and see if we can find something that is maybe a little closer representative to what our intent actually is. And if you don't mind, I'd like to maybe share that with Hugo to make sure that their concerns are addressed and we're all on the same page there.
Okay.
So I think we have
Good idea.
we have a plan for that. So
Good
Any
idea.
other comments?
Madam President. So just to clarify a little bit, last meeting I did vote with the acceptance of the comments, but I made a point about your Manager Bradley's comment number 17 that I didn't agree with it. And I voted with it because I want to be in the majority in order to come back and take a look at that very closely. And today, I don't know if I should stand here at this part or go down to the podium, actually, because I have some additional comments to make about this.
Well, are
Not
you
only as a-
representing yourself? or
As
are
a
you
manager
Yeah,
and also as a citizen.
then as a citizen, you should go to the podium. Thank you.
You didn't bring your tree. He's got a shopping bag, but not his tree.
I like to go show and tell.
I bet you did.
Madam President, I'm John Waller. I live at 14010 Homestead Avenue in Hugo, Minnesota. I am also a manager on the Rice Creek Watershed District. For full disclosure, and I don't always, in this particular issues, agree with the Board of Managers. The Board of Managers has adopted a policy that was demonstrated on what they called water knows no boundaries. And I disagree with that because over the years, the water management plan does designate boundaries. We distribute money on individual property ownership boundaries. We distribute money on city
John, can I
boundaries.
stop you 1 minute?
And so-
Can you go to the comment number
So,
so that we can know
What I'm talking
exactly
about, what I'm basically talking about is number 17.
Number 17, okay.
Number 17, number 18, 23, and Washington County number 1, paragraph 2, which we're talking about distribution of money on geographical areas. And so I don't agree with Manager Bradley's language at the time, and I wrote down on my sheet last week, Bradley suggests replies, quote, he hopes these are not just words. And my comment at the time was there are no guardrails here. In other words, there's no substantive change to provide distribution money as there had been back in 1992 when Ramsey County complained during the late 80s about the amount of money that was being spent in Anoka County and their tax dollar. And I wanted just to make this clear that while I agree with Brian that it would be best to solve this issue without going to the legislature, nevertheless, the legislature and the bills that are in the legislature currently are very widely supported in Washington County. And that's why I rose today to show you that there are 1,157 individuals in these books that have placed their name and address from Matamidi, Birchwood, Grant, Hugo, a little bit of White Bear Lake that happens to be in Washington County, Forest Lake. And there are notebooks here, one right after another, of individuals. And what this is if the television camera has the opportunity to just take a quick look, maybe I haven't had this quite centered right here, okay? You'll see that it's a copy of the legislation, and at the bottom of it says, I support Senate file and House file for each one. Here's another notebook. And here's another notebook. This is very, very widely supported in Washington County. And I think it's important to recognize that since the years that we've spent here communicating with the districts, cities, we now hold annual meetings with them and the counties, that we recognize that the citizens of Washington County wish to see their funding that's taxed from them spent back in their county. And while I agree that the language is very nice, there's really no substantive change to guarantee or prevent something like ditch number 5, which I talked at the last meeting about here, where 47 years nothing had been done about that. And ditch number 5 is just the last. And I'm going to tell you, we've done a lot of work on ditches, President Preiner. We certainly have. And I would say that I believe the one that's been discriminated the most of all the 3 counties on the drainage issue and had to pay most extra taxes is Anoka, although some of it's in Forest Lake. And so I think that if the concept of thinking that money collected by general tax dollars being spent in one part of the district benefits all parts of the district really hasn't been followed as this district as a policy since 1992. And as we had at our last workshop, the explanation of how we came with trunk conveyance systems versus just plain branches. And so I don't find that this concept that Hugo was talking about or Washington County is talking about. In Washington County, I believe they, in their letter, pardon me while I clumsily fumble through these and put them away, that they addressed to Senator Housley, and I'm all right there, fine. And Senator Housley and to Representative Fisher, the authors of that legislation, when they said, the House in File 2314, Senate File 2372 provides additional oversight of the activities of the watershed, ensuring that the residents of the county that pay into the watershed benefit directly from its activities. And they also went on to say that it's not unreasonable to assure the Washington County taxpayers get direct benefit as well as for their tax dollars. And so that's my point here being is that hasn't been accomplished yet in this plan. And I believe it really needs to be some way to look at it. You had an example in Hugo's numbers there. I think it's 23, where they mentioned the cost of savings to the district of nearly $1 million annually now because the growth is so great, and looking for those fundings to come back. So as in 1992 for Ramsey County, when a reconsideration was made and revisions and changes, significant changes in the plan, I think that we've arrived at that junction again. And thank you for this opportunity today.
Thank you, Matt Joel. Would you please leave a copy of your petition so that we have one in the file?
Oh, I only have one each, but I'll work with Teresa to
I'm sure.
provide.
No, I don't know. I don't need. I just want to know what it says, and I want to know what the explanation when.
She was asking for the book. She was just asking for your form.
Just.
Oh, the form.
Yeah. So
I
that
can give
people,
her a
I'd like
copy
to know
of the
what
form.
people understood
Sure.
when they signed this.
Sure.
Very good.
I will tell you immediately that the petition that these folks signed said that when they supported the House file, it was a copy of the language that they read just before they put their name down. Did they agree with this language above or not?
Did they have any explanation as to what the results would be if they signed it? Like more taxes possible?
There's always a chance of more taxes. And yes, they did have an explanation of more taxes and realized that more taxes would stay in their communities and if this legislation was, and focused on their particular problems.
Anybody else, questions for Manager Waller? Or Citizen Waller at this point? Anything else? Thank you, Jen. Hey, anybody else like to speak on this? Anybody else? Kyle, anything more to add? If not, we're going to go ahead and close our public hearing. Thank you. And we'll go to open mic. Anybody in the audience that'd like to speak to open mic? Seeing none, we're going to move on. Thank you, Brian. And number one, the Association of Watershed Districts mod meeting.
President Priner, Board of Managers, you'll recall at the workshop, we provided you the mod agenda for their upcoming meeting to be held at the annual conference. You did provide staff some direction on that, and we'd like to follow up with an action by the board in regards to,
And that pertains to the handout today then,
that's correct. Beth
Okay.
handed out a new packet item today.
dated November 4th.
Yep.
Okay.
I should note that those mod materials are available to the public here at the meeting.
All right.
Good morning, President Priner, Board of Managers, other representatives of the Watershed District. At last Friday's board workshop, we received the mod packet for their annual meeting. It included 13 resolutions, the agenda for that meeting, which would also include the discussion of those resolutions, a budget, a proposed budget, and proposed strategic plan document. The task items we had for Friday were to really discuss those 13 resolutions, kind of come to an agreement on the board position, and then also identify 2 delegates for the mod annual meeting and an alternate. So the document that you have in front of you, we took each of the resolutions, stated them again, transitioned it, or restated the language as the RCWD position to support or oppose. That was based on the conversations and the direction at Friday's workshop. And then a comment. Those comments reflected kind of the direction of the board, how the board came to that decision. Some of those comments also include additional information that the delegates may want to use in discussions at the mod meeting. So we're asking 2 things of you today. One is to officially appoint your 2 delegates and your alternate for that mod meeting. The other is to approve the positions for these resolutions as we discussed on Friday, and then instruct the delegates to vote in accordance with those. Staff would also ask, related to the other 2 things in the mod packet, there was a proposed 2020 budget and a proposed updated strategic plan. The last one was in 2016. If there's any specific information that the board would like staff to research and share, or anything that, any direction that the board would like to give staff, we could make it at this time.
Madam Chair? I'd like to make a motion that our 2 delegates to MAUD convention that's happening in December is Michael Bradley and John Waller, and alternative is Steve Wagman, and that's it.
I'll second that.
Okay, and explanation, Steve is, he's not sure, but he's intending on being there. And if he can make it, he will be there. Otherwise, we would not have an alternate because the other ones will not be attending.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
It's our time to complain now, Mike.
Well, there's no one left to
To
fill
go-
our shoes. Otherwise,
Do you
I
want
would-
to withdraw being our delegate?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and the next motion?
Next motion is I'd like to make is that there are 13 resolutions that are going to be on the mods, in the mods discussion for the mod resolutions that would be in effect for 2020. And I'd like to make a motion that we accept those 13 resolutions we do have a motion made here, is for a minute, what to say?
Yeah, you're to instruct the delegates to vote in accordance with this.
All right, I just have down here at the bottom, resolution 1. Oh, proposed motion. Okay, I make this motion. Forget what I just said. I withdraw what I was just talking about. I'd like to instruct the delegates to vote in accordance with the stated Rice Creek Watershed District positions related to the 13 resolutions and other matters on the agenda at the MAUD 2019 meeting.
Second? Any further discussion? Okay.
President Priner, Board of Managers, just for clarity, I'll note that Barbara's motion and the one that was provided to you includes those other matters. That is the budget and then the strategic plan. And if you had any additional discussion in regards to those matters and how you'd want the delegates to, and the alternative, handle that.
To be clear here, the budget and strategic plan of the MOD.
Of MOD, correct.
We're discussing a couple other things today
Yeah.
with our local.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, this is
Well,
for
I
Ron.
would like to make this one clear and have just this one right now, and I'll address the other one that you're talking about in a second. Only because I have not actually gone through their strategic plan and their budget. So, anybody else? Because this is clear to me, and this is what I definitely have reviewed and seen.
So do you
It's
want to
13.
strike the and other matters on the agenda, or just the 13 resolutions?
Just the 13 resolutions
Okay,
is what
and
I'd
we'll
like
strike
to
and
say
other
and have
matters.
that pass right now. But the rest of you read Maud's budget and
No,
the strategic
I have not.
plan.
I'm not likely to. But this motion would sweep in any future actions by this board with regard to those two items.
Oh, it
The
says other
allows
matters.
that too.
Oh,
Nick?
President Priner, Board of Managers, if it's helpful, staff did take a generalized look at the budget. There were some sweeping changes when MOD, was it 2016, Beth, where?
When they transitioned to Emily as the executive director.
Right.
But
And so you
well,
saw
she's just
some
been
large,
there a year now.
some jumps or changes in their budget at that time. But there wasn't a large jump in the budget amounts. I'll just say it was more attributable to cost of living. In other words, staff did not find anything to stick out that would be like, whoa, why are things
different? Yeah.
changing? So that's the budget. And as to the strategic plan, we're a little bit short on maybe Maud's communication as to what the plan was.
So if I could interrupt just
Please,
briefly.
yes.
So the real difference seems to be in just like the 3 or 4 cover pages of that strategic plan. In the one that they have published on their website, it's over 200 pages long. And at first, staff was like, whoa, they went from 200 plus pages to 4. And what it appears to be that the significant change is the appendices and the additional documents they've included in the strategic plan. The structure of those initial pages that kind of give the vision and the mission and the purpose of it, they seem to stick to the kind of the core values of MAUD, so.
Madam Chair, I guess what I'd still like to do is then, here we go, scrap that motion that I had made. I'd
I
like
had
to
a second
withdraw
on
it.
that,
No
so
second.
we have to reject.
No second.
Yeah.
Okay, you take your second off of
Yeah.
when I did that. What I'd still like to do then is, I am fine with the 13 resolutions, okay? And that's what I want this motion to relate to.
Perfect.
So, I instruct the delegates to vote in accordance with the stated Rice Creek Watershed District positions related to the 13 resolutions on the agenda at the MAUD 2019 meeting. That's clean.
Okay, I'll second that. Anybody else?
So, Madam President, in the past, at board meetings, we've gone through each individual resolution here. And so the public was aware of what we supported or not supported. Today, that doesn't appear to be what we're going to do. And second, although I, as a manager, have only disagreed with resolution number 6, but as a delegate, I'm bound by the majority of the board, not by
That's right.
as an individual. But I would point out that what's happening here this time is that we're not going through those resolutions.
You know what?
We can.
I will,
Yeah.
that's egg on my
So-
face. I've never done
so-
this approach before it was done by Phil. I'm happy to read them.
No,
Oh, I
May
apologize.
I finish? Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, so I'm asking that in the record, the minutes of the meeting, that the resolutions and the decisions be made. I think they're all 5-0 except for 6, which is a 4-1, and, to reflect the
That's fine.
opinions.
May I ask the question? Would you like me to go through? That's just me
Don't worry.
doing this for the first time.
don't worry, you're doing a great job. We're just doing the 13 resolutions, and we had them, and I guess somebody said they're on the website, I don't know. And this is to bind the delegates, because this is what we decided. We've got whether we oppose or have supported them, and this is our stand, and that's how they're going to end up voting. Now,
Sure.
I'm just talking about the resolutions.
Do you
and
want me to read them out loud, though? Because Manager Waller said in the past, at the meetings, we've actually,
Discussed them, yeah.
would you like me to reread them then?
Did you say that they're on the website?
Well, they're also in this document, but
Yes, I
they're,
know they're in here.
and they're in the packet,
Okay,
but I'm,
whatever the board here
What
wants
does
to
the board
do.
want to do? We did have lengthy discussion and
I
consensus
just
came
have-
out
yeah,
on
and-
workshop.
I don't know how many people watch our meetings, or even to go through them and be like, waive the reading or whatever. If it's on the website, they can find it. Otherwise, it's the board. 4 of you vote, 4 of us vote. Do you want her to read through these very brief things?
I don't think
in the
that's
2
necessary at
pages?
this point. Maybe we want to start it again next year. Manager Waller did take objection. He wants to make
That's
sure it's
right.
on the record, and that's fine.
That's all.
That's all
I
he's
I
saying.
don't think reading these 2 pages would inform the public.
Anybody.
Public
Yeah.
anything. So we are going to
I-
waive the reading.
I'm just saying, in the
Okay.
past, we had, the discussion that we had at the workshop at the board meeting.
Yeah.
But we're waiving the reading, and if somebody's really curious, they can find something on the website. So my motion is just simply that we're going to, the delegates are going to vote in accordance with the stated Rice Creek Watershed District positions related, or that's on the agenda, the MAUD 2019 meeting. That's what the motion was. It's been seconded, so.
Okay, any
other-
further discussion?
And waive the reading. Okay.
All in favor?
I.
Aye.
And of course, we've got recorded Mr. Waller's statement.
Statement.
Now, going
And now
back to the
reflect in
other
the
2
minutes.
positions,
Yeah.
the other matters on the agenda. First of all, I've been on the board, and they have done a very conscientious, always in the past. I can accept the fact that our staff has seen it and has said that there's just been a little bit of a change, if there is at all, but they always do a very thorough investigation of the budget. So I have no problem on that. As far as the 200-page plan that they've got, strategic plan, I haven't read it, I can't vote on it, and I am not, maybe at the meeting itself at MAUD, they'll have it there. They should lay out what it is at one of their meetings, and the delegates would be able to figure out what they're going to do in that.
to clarify, it was the 2016 strategic plan that was over 200 pages. The one that they've submitted now is about 4 pages long. And what it appears is that the strategic document is the 4-page. That's consistent with 2016. In 2016, the other several hundred pages were everything from detailed budgets, what they were bringing, their profit and profit loss sheets, what they were charging or getting as income from the different watershed districts. So that appears, it's all supporting documentation. The real meat and potatoes is that 4 pages, and it appears very consistent.
Okay, and the other thing, though, in that plan of 2016, I was on it at that time, and I didn't even read the 200 pages at the time. I do know that one of their plans was to transition from having Ray being our administrator and our lobbyist and everything, and separating out those positions and going forward. That was the big thing that our 2016 really was trying to strive for, and they've accomplished it. So that has to be something in those 4 pages, or it had been basically a map on how we were going to go forward, because Ray had wanted to retire, and so did Peg Bone. So, I guess I can make a motion that
Well,
we.
may I ask a
support-
clarifying question? The schedule in November is a little strange. Do you have another December meeting? Not until after
Not till
Monday,
after.
okay.
Okay, So I guess I can understand the budget. As I said, they have worked very hard on it. Our staff has looked at it to see that it looks like it seems reasonable. So I would just make a motion that I would like to also say that direct the delegates to vote yes on the budget for the coming year of the mod.
Okay, that's your motion.
Yes.
I'll second it. Any further discussion? All in favor? Oh,
Well,
go
Madam
ahead.
President, one of the things that with budgets, they can become quite a discussion item, and if there's a floor discussion there that materially changes that budget, we're kind of, you're not giving the
bound by it.
delegate,
Yeah.
you're binding the delegate's ability to make decisions. So I would prefer that the delegates be allowed to use their best judgment, and I'm sure I don't think it'll be unreasonable. But I mean, those things can happen as to what happens in a convention. You can have quite a bit of change of any particular individual resolution, for example, so it won't be exact. And then you're bound to maybe not be able to vote for a compromise that settles the issue, provides part.
That's true.
So that's, by binding them to the exact words, as a delegate, you really can follow up the situation.
Then
That's
we'll
true, Mr. Waller,
we'll do a roll call on the motion then. Waller?
No,
on the budget.
no, I'm not.
On
the
this
budget.
motion, on the budget.
No.
I'll say no.
Yeah, no, you convinced us, Mr. Waller. Wow. Let's put
Manager-
that one up there.
Manager Bradley, is there good faith language that we could propose?
No.
No, okay.
Okay, so,
Okay.
we
So we'll leave
finished
it as it is.
We'll
and
leave
we'll
it
move
as
on.
it is.
Okay.
And that's the same thing with
So-
the plan.
So I understand that other than the resolutions, the delegates have delegate
Authority.
authority
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
to act for the board.
Yeah, thank you, Beth, for getting it together for us. Okay, Fridley Civic Center Complex, Kyle.
Madam President, members of the board, I'm simply here on behalf of Lauren San Pedro at the moment, seeing I was already going to be at the meeting. But we have for your consideration a request for payment to the city of Fridley. This is cost share funding for their Civic Center redevelopment project. As you know, this was a very large capital undertaking by the city of Fridley. As a part of that new city hall and city hall complex project, they implemented a series of stormwater management practices out there, a very large chain of projects, if you will, that far exceeded the district's rule requirements. As a part of that project, they were awarded a $159,000 Metropolitan Council stormwater grant, which came through the Watershed District. And further, the district board committed up to $70,000 in funding through its Southwest Urban Lakes implementation program to further assist the projects implemented at the city hall. At this time, those projects are complete. Again, there's a large chain of stormwater ponds, aeration system. There's iron enhanced sand filters, biochar filters for E. coli removal, and others. It's actually a pretty comprehensive site. And again, everything is complete at this time with the exception of the installation of educational signage that Met Council requires. But at this time, Met Council has provided to the Watershed District a 90% payment on that grant award, the $159,000. So that's $143,100. And consistent with that, the district staff believes the city of Fridley has done enough work to get 90% of the grant funds that we committed to the project as well. And we're recommending that the board authorize then a total of $206,100 to be reimbursed to the city of Fridley for that project. So that remains a total of $22,900 would remain and be payable to the city as soon as they get that signage installed. But it's been a very successful project.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. Need a motion? Any questions for Kyle? Anything?
Madam President, I move that we approve payment of $206,100 to the city of Fridley as a 90% payment for this project in accordance with the Met Council grant agreement and MOA between the city and district.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have the resolution authorizing treasurer approval. Nick?
Yes, President Priner, Board of Managers, as in previous years, you only have one meeting in November, but the district does have its financial obligations, and so we're looking for authorization for a check register later in the month here with limitations of $375,000 for operating expenses and $150,000 for surety returns. There is a resolution on page 52 of the packet.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve resolution number 19-28, and this is the authorization for payment of November 2019 check register. It would be in the amount not to exceed $375,000 for operating expenses and $150,000 for surety returns.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
I
Aye.
think it requires a roll call.
Roll call.
Oh,
for
I'm sorry.
resolution, isn't it?
Yep, I'm sorry. Waller.
Yes.
Hockey.
Yes.
Bradley.
Yes.
Wageman absent. Priner, yes. Motion passes. Okay, cities. Nick.
Liability coverage waiver
Yes.
form.
Yes, President Priner, Board of Managers, again, annually, we do have this issue come up, League of Minnesota Cities Liability Coverage Waiver Form. In the past years, 2016, 17, 18, and 19, you have voted to waive the monetary limits on the municipal tort liability. Again, it's before you again for consideration.
Okay, any questions?
Madam Chair,
No? Go ahead.
I can make a motion, you
No,
stop the
wait,
question.
wait,
I'm
wait.
sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, and just for the record, I would like to complete the administrator's thought. It's not a waiver per se, it's a waiver to the limits of the district's policy.
Correct, yep. Thank you. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, we got it right there, don't we? I'd like to make a motion that the district waives the monetary limits on municipal tort for liability established by Minnesota statute section 466.04 to the extent of the limits of the liability coverage obtained from the League of Minnesota Cities, LMCIT insurance.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Check register.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the check register dated November 4th, 2019, in the amount of $46,090.35, prepared by Redpath and Company.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, calendar.
I will be there November 6th at 5:30 for the CAC meeting,
Oh, okay.
Wednesday night.
I will be there, okay. Anything else?
Otherwise, you can see it's a very full calendar, mostly listing all the holidays.
Holidays, we won't be here.
And when the office is closed.
Okay. Any further discussion on the calendar? If not, we'll just go ahead to the manager's
Adjournment?
updates. Manager's updates, Manager Waller. Oh, wait a minute, Nick had it.
President Priner, Board of Managers, I just wanted to let you know, as I mentioned before, we did post the permit coordinator, wetland specialist position internally. We did have one internal candidate that was interviewed with Houston Engineering and myself. I figured that would be a good coordination of our activities and our view of the program. And that was Patrick Hughes. He was successful in the interview, and so we will extend to him the position.
Quick question, when you post something though, it goes out to everybody, there was no other responses? I mean, I have nothing wrong with
Yeah.
this, it's just that the word posting hits me as that there's a vast
You
people.
did say internally.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, only
Internal
posted
posting.
internally.
Internal first.
That's
Oh,
correct.
oh, okay, I'm sorry, thanks. Should have listened to every word I hung on every word you said, so I wouldn't have forgotten.
Now,
that.
do we have to then post his position next, or is it already?
Yes, President Priner, it's quite a game of dominoes, so we'll see if, I think it's reasonable in the district's management of its staff, that instead of people seeking outside opportunities, if there is something inside and someone does have an interest, whether that be a progression, if you will, up the ladder or lateral, that they have a greater interest and skill set in a different area that they'd like to exercise, provided they're in good standing, that they be offered that opportunity internally. So, yes, at the end of the day, we will very likely have an outside posting that we will make.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Manager's update, Manager Waller.
Nothing at the moment. I think we've had some thorough discussions the last week or two.
Okay, Manager Bradley.
Thank you, President. I attended the annual Bald Eagle Area Association meeting. Matt Koshin was there, did a very nice job, as he always does. They got authorization from their dues-paying members to allow them to use funds not spent on weed control this year on matching grants with us for water quality programs such as rain gardens and riprap, et cetera. So
Great.
Good idea.
Very good.
it's my
Good use of
understanding they've
money.
been working with Laura on possibilities.
Good. Good use of money. No,
Okay.
nothing.
And I have nothing new, so I think we're done for the month.
Yeah.
Need a
Happy
motion?
Thanksgiving,
Need a
everybody.
Motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made and seconded, all in favor?
Hey.
Aye.